Thank you and welcome. We're so excited to have everyone here today. I'm going to be doing the first portion of the presentation, and then Tuck and Terry will support with the Q&A portion. So here we go. In order to achieve drawdown to reverse global warming, to really address the climate crisis, we need collaboration. So we thank the League of Women Voters for hosting. And we also thank Drawdown. Project Drawdown is the material we're going to be engaging with today. We'll speak a lot about that. Pachamama and Move the World, as Kitty mentioned, are our two organizations that are represented today. Pachamama's mission statement is bringing forth an environmentally sustainable, spiritually fulfilling, socially just human presence on the planet. You can really begin to hear the connection between climate reversal, climate solutions, and social justice. With my organization, as Kitty mentioned, our mission is to move us toward a climate reversal through the power of performing arts, education, and social action. We really believe that arts can heal, and we use arts to promote climate change, climate reversal. So we want to begin with the question to you. What do you think of when you hear the words climate change, climate global warming, climate? What's right on the tip of your tongue? And perhaps we can start to see some of those in the chat. I'm not able to see them on my screen. Let me see if I can make that available to myself. I don't think I can see those, but Terry, can you see a few of the chat, the responses in the chat? What is right on the tip of your mind when you hear those words, climate change and global warming?
Disruption of people's living situations. One from Martha.
What comes to mind often when we talk about climate change is the outcomes. And when we polled, when Project Drawdown polled 14,000 people, that's what came to mind first, is the outcomes, the results, the things that we see and are disturbed by. Only 18% of those polled mentioned the causes, so that's secondary. We all know that emissions and coal and fossil fuels are a factor, and yet only 3% of the people polled really came up with solutions. So that really speaks to the work that we do with Drawdown. What is Drawdown? Drawdown is the point at which atmospheric carbon dioxide levels peak and begin to fall or draw down. So climate change is really created by an excess greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, right? And so in order to achieve Drawdown, we need to bring those gases back home. Drawdown, Project Drawdown, is the world's leading resource for compiling climate solutions. Paul Hawken was the original editor of the original book in 2017. It's a tremendous resource. I have it right here, and I use it with my young students still. There's beautiful photography and really lays out the climate solutions in ranking originally the top 100 solutions to address climate change. A fun idea was that he, nobody would pay for this this research, so he took a $150,000 loan on his retirement plan and paid stipends to 1,200 scientists and lead authors and IPCC scientists to really map, measure, and model the top climate solutions. In 2020, they reviewed the material again. They do regular analysis of climate solutions, and they created a website, drawdown.org, and they do these reviews regularly. It's their central effort to respond nimbly and rapidly to this evolving landscape of solutions. What is the goal? The goal of Drawdown is really to reverse global warming. We really need to approach this idea, approach the material with the concept that it is possible. This is not a widely promoted idea out there yet, but it's the beginning of this movement, and it's one that we want to engage with. It's not to mitigate, it's not to slow it down, it's literally to reverse it. So the Drawdown solutions, pardon me, there's moving a little faster than I wanted to. The Drawdown solutions are laid out in sectors. Electricity at the top there is what most people think about green energy. Yes, it's all things green energy and green power. Down at the bottom here, you have buildings as you move up to the left, buildings, transport, and industry. Industry is composting, bioplastics, new cement. These are a lot of innovations. Transport, electric trucks, trains and cars, bike infrastructure, and in expanding that. Buildings, net zero buildings, retrofitting buildings, and green roofs. Have you heard of one of those? The food, agriculture, and land up there on the top left is all combined. It originally wasn't, they were separated, but this is all things regenerative ag. So it's really about soil health, really improving the soil. Up to the right, health and education used to be called education of women and girls and family planning. It's now combined into one sector, and we'll talk more about that. And then these bottom three, land sinks, ocean and coastal sinks, these are where we sequester carbon. So let's talk about that for a minute. So land sinks, this is where, the biology of our planet aids us in pulling down the carbon. Carbon is the core of trees, mammals, grasses, really everything on the planet. Plants and healthy ecosystems have an unparalleled capacity to absorb carbon through photosynthesis, taking that energy out, storing it in the living biomass. Soil with carbon content has more productivity and more resiliency. So it's beneficial, obviously, for our food sources, for all plant life. 26% of our human emissions are sequestered in the soil, in land. Ocean sinks are the other place. So 25% of human emissions have also been sequestered in the oceans. I mean, they've really been working overtime, and there's really not much more they can do. The capacity is fairly maxed. 200 million tons of carbon are captured annually by microalgae. The acidification in our oceans, the dead zones really are a result of that. We really want to expand our support of wetlands, and that's the interface between the ocean and the land. That is a place of improvement that we can make. So Project Drawdown really lays out the solution for climate change in two ways: limiting emissions on the left there and sequestering carbon on the right. All of those sectors and solutions, the electricity, food, industry, are all coming to the center of the atmosphere, expelling emissions. And then what we need to do to achieve Drawdown is to sequester more. Obviously, the coastal and land sinks on the right are there. And then that 59% is really our future of engineering, our innovation, the engineering sinks, if you will. So that's our innovation. That's where we're headed. That's what's exciting about Drawdown. They're laid out in 82 climate solutions. There's really something for everyone. And if you oftentimes hear, people like yourselves who I'm sure are very active personally, maybe you have a compost, maybe you eat plant-based, maybe you drive a Prius. Those are all important individual steps. And yet, we really need all the solutions in order to achieve Drawdown. It's not one thing. It's how they all work together. This points to a diversity, in all of the solutions. A lot of people think about green energy being the main or the central idea. No, that's only 25% of the emissions and how we need to shift in order to achieve drawdown. The one down here called refrigeration, it's not a very sexy topic, but if you think about our developing nations and how their air conditioning are just coming online now, millions and millions of households and industry are beginning that process of having air conditioning. Well, the disposal of refrigerants is very important. That is a huge warming aspect, increases the greenhouse gases. I'm going to highlight down below here, voluntary reproductive health care and inclusive education for women and girls is critical. If you can see on the right-hand side, the savings, the sequestered carbon is measured in gigatons, 85 gigatons, and a gigaton is 100,000 elephants. So that's what my young students can capture their imagination and imagine how vast this mission is. And yet health and education for women is critical. Here's basically how it works. Population, we're on, I'm so sorry, this is very sensitive. The population, we're headed for 9 to 10 billion by 2050. And this is largely impacted by fertility rates, as you can imagine. Once our social welfare is improved, our equity, our social equity, this is where social justice impacts climate justice right there. The well-being of women and girls begins to open and opportunities become available. This impacts education. Education rises. We make way for education to be girl-friendly, and mainly we think about this in a developing world, but it's happening in East LA. Move the World supports an organization called Love Activists, and it's young third and fourth graders, primarily girls, that are becoming learning about themselves, learning to perform around social justice, climate justice ideas, and we teach them dance classes so that there is after school education. There's a place to go. This is really important. It's happening right here. Continuing down, obviously reproductive health care becomes more available. There's more choices. Girls and women can decide to have an opportunity to have an economic or a job-centered life prior to building a family. So their political and social economic empowerment is a natural outcome. And this is how it impacts fertility rates. One of our heroes is Catherine Wilkinson. She is one of the co-authors of the book, Drawdown, and also the Drawdown Review. She really speaks to climate being a threat multiplier for women and girls. If you're already disadvantaged, climate issues, increased warming, a lack of food deserts, all these things multiply that threat. And we really can't change the system without changing the leadership. So again, this is an emphasis for Drawdown. You can see that not only are there the science-based solutions, but you can see how we need to shift our focus and shift our accessibility for all of humanity. The hallmarks of female leadership that she mentions really are that, we need to move in the directions of being more collaborative in our leadership, a heart and head-based leadership without ignoring the science, and in being inclusive. We're beginning to see that in the West here. It's very exciting. Another aspect of Drawdown that we teach is how to make social change. This is a movement, and we want to empower people, and we want to empower ourselves. So I think on the individual level, most of you listening in today probably are very active already, and that's what I call climate change is personal habit change. And we begin to drive that electric car, put solar panels on our house, that sort of thing. Level 2 and 3 are a little harder. So we begin to use, activate our changes within our groups and families, our churches, our synagogues, our clubs, and you start to see a leverage point where you're making a bigger impact. So we're really encouraging people like yourselves to become climate leaders. Organizations, obviously, if you get that solar panel on your children's school, your grandchildren's school, that is starting to make a much bigger impact. And then policy, League of Women Voters is extremely active in that area. Level 1 and level 4 is what most people think we need to focus on, but it's actually, the points of leverage are stronger with level 2 and 3. So that's where we begin to focus. Here's an example, individual and family. This is level 1 and 2. So if you just shifted your own diet to more plant-rich and reduced packaging, which is recycling, maybe you're going to a farmer's market. Then if you begin to have your family, your extended family, that starts to make a bigger impact. Here's the same idea with composting organization. This is level 3 and 4, policy and organization. So 50% essentially of all of the trash in the landfill is from food waste. This is a really big problem because it creates methane, and methane is 100 times more powerful as a warming gas than CO2. Then you shift that into a policy perspective. I often like to highlight the LA Sustainability Plan. It's very good. And their goal is to reduce 75% of food waste out of the landfill in the next 4 years. Powerful. So you see the leverage points. We're going to highlight a couple of drawdown solutions. This is just tip of the iceberg, literally. Coastal wetland protection. The Bologna wetlands are right in our backyard here in Los Angeles. It's the interface where the sea meets the land, and the wetlands are relative to their land area, sequester a huge amount of carbon in plants above ground, but then the roots and soil below. They filter the carbon, as I mentioned, and it's vital to protect and preserve these wetlands to keep a lid on the carbon that they already sequester. Once you disturb these lands, the carbon goes up into the atmosphere. Microgrids. So we traditionally have a centralized electric system where all of the power feeds into a central location, an SCE or DWP. Microgrids are a community. It's a smaller, just decentralized plan where you capture perhaps via solar or wind, and you use it within that small community. You can load in your power into the smaller grid, and then you can pull it out when you need to use it. Korea uses this. It's extensive in their plan, and it really works very well. Here's electric bikes. I like to highlight this one because I live in Topanga and we are a very hilly community, and bike infrastructure is difficult here. But using electric bikes where you're powered or power assisted bikes, can open up that opportunity for more people. Also, just down here, you can see how all of the solutions are calculated on the number of gigatons sequestered. Also, the investment cost in trillions, 1.15 trillion, and then the lifetime savings, 1.88. So you start to see, yes, there is an investment that needs to happen, and then also there's this huge savings. Here's a solution that I just found out about the other day. It's vertical farming. So it's a way, we talked about that 9 to 10 billion of people we need to begin to feed over the next, that's by 2050. So urban farming, how do we get the food into the cities without trucking it from way out in the fields and the farms? They are repurposing large buildings and growing huge storied farms in these little shelvings using LED lights. And their yield is incredible. It's 130 times more than the same size land in a field. They can grow it faster. They don't use fertilizers. And most importantly, the food is where it needs to be. You're reducing that trucking and electricity cost. We like to highlight the co-benefits of the drawdown solutions. Obviously, the planet is going to benefit and people are going to benefit, but it saves money. This is something we don't hear a lot about, but once the initial investment is covered over the lifetime of the solution, it can be really powerful in terms of savings, creating jobs. This is where I really celebrate this. And my young students are very excited about this, to be ready for this new economy. And then obviously social justice. That's Ron Finley down there as the gangsta gardener, rehabilitating the inner gardens of Los Angeles. I mentioned that our county sustainability plan is fully aligned with these solutions. I mentioned the food waste. You can see there the tree canopy, increasing that by 15% over the next 4 years. You're going to start to see massive planting and greening of the urban landscape. That's exciting. So we're really lucky. And how LA goes, the world goes. And so that we're a wonderful example for the world. So I'm so sorry. This is really testy. So we're going to talk briefly about the what we've learned from COVID and how it can help us understand how we can really use our leadership and how leadership impacts health and environment. The intersection of health and environment has become so clear. I'm sure I don't have to really expound on this, but what we really want to notice is the local choices, the local leadership that we've had has been incredible, and that has kept us safer and safer. This is making a huge impact, and our choices impact our health and the environment. Here's a snapshot of a journal article from Nature Journal in December. It's really reminding us that the intersection between our challenges with COVID and our challenges with climate risk are overlapping. And you just can take the idea of heat in our heat waves in Los Angeles. If our hospitals are filled with COVID patients, if we are not able to meet that need, and when we have a heat wave, which impacts the elderly, it impacts pregnant women disproportionately, and they need help. You start to see this intersection between healthcare and the climate and COVID. So we're really, it's a multiplier. It's a threat multiplier, climate, along with at this time of COVID. The good news is we're making a climate comeback. This is really the first time that an administration is leading with climate, and we're so fortunate to be making these changes. Obviously, President Biden already rejoined the Paris Climate Accord on his first day, and then later in the year, there's a very important meeting in Glasgow in November where countries will make a new round of pledges to cut greenhouse emissions. So we're looking forward to progress on this, and it should be moving rapidly. We should be getting some momentum here. So it's an exciting time to really jump on this. We're seeing already with COVID that there is a return to the focus on science and federal and state cooperation. We're hoping and intending that this is the same with climate reversal. Lastly, we really want to just ask the question, what story are we living into? This is a huge shift, a shift in reimagining our economies, reimagining how we work, how we live on a daily basis, how our groups and communities work together. So we want to create a just transition. And so we're just encouraging us to take a pause and remember to bring along all people. To respect all life is really at the foundation. If we just create lots of solutions but don't retain our connection to the planet, to Earth, to nature connection, in our classes we really talk about increasing your mindfulness practices, to allow your heart to open. Because if we, the only way to really make a lasting change is to bring along all people, to move from a story of domination of the earth to coexistence with all of life. Our beautiful Amanda Gorman said it best, and so I thought we would just read her quote from the inauguration the other day. We are striving to forge our union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze, not to what stands between us, but to what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. And that is truly the spirit in which we continue. We ask and invite all of you to bring together our moral clarity, our scientific rigor, and our imagination to solve global warming. We also invite you to a free drawdown workshop where you can take these ideas and get into action. What we've found is that everybody wants to do the right thing, but they need support. And starting in a small group, starting in a class of 5 sessions, you can get active, you can make change, and begin to be a leader in climate. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kitty and our other panelists for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Cecilie. There's so much to think about there and so much hope. So I want to say that we're going to go into question and answer now. Don't forget to add any questions you have to the question and answer box. And I'm going to start by trying to find the first question here. Okay, here's a question that says, who can create the solutions with the biggest positive impact? Governments or corporations? So I'll leave it up to you to decide who is going to answer.
I'll take a stab at that because I think the answer is pretty clear. We need both. We need both full time, and I think we're seeing that now with the challenge of getting the vaccination into arms. We have the government moving forward aggressively, but also we have the corporate volunteering, the corporate sector volunteering to aid with that. And I think that is exemplary cooperation we need in moving into the future of reversing global warming.
Okay, does anyone else want to add to that?
Yes, I would. I think this is a great opportunity for business, quite honestly. People tend to view this as a downtime because of as Cecilie pointed out in that slide, most people focus on the where are we. We, with Drawdown, like to look into that future, and I think given that there are solutions already in place, it's simply a matter of scaling them. The opportunity is so ripe for corporations to get involved and to have science backing them up. So the R&D is being done. It's a matter of taking it to scale. And not that there wouldn't be new solutions, but this is a very, very good time for business as well.
Great, thank you. So here's a question. What is net zero?
Right. So the buildings that are sort of like using the concept of biomimicry. So plants, people are the only animals that produce waste. So plants are a terrific model. So a building that is net zero captures its own energy, processes its own waste, and maintains an equal temperature throughout the day and night through all these means of innovation There's the Hilton Foundation out in Agoura Hills is a wonderful net zero building. They call them LEED buildings. Net zero is where there's zero waste and zero need. They process their own water. They do water capture, really implementing all of these innovations in one building. And they're tremendous examples for us to follow and to replicate.
There can be net zero communities too, where community, where Terry and I work. The neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church has taken a pledge to be net zero and has done a census of the energy that we use, and are striving through physical means. They're changing light bulbs and insulation and the weatherproofing and so forth to reduce the amount of energy that we use. But then we have additionally a pledge to compensate by buying carbon credits elsewhere to bring our community to net zero if we're not able to do that internally at this point.
Thank you. So this question says, many scientists say that by the time we detect the impact of climate change, it's too late. And the CO2 that is impacting us now was emitted decades ago. Impacts already baked in.
Project Drawdown reverses or upends the paradigm. It says we have a distinct goal that we are working toward, which is a point at which heat trapping gases into the atmosphere are less than the heat trapping gases that we bring out of the atmosphere on a year-by-year basis. And we focus on the solutions that will affect that. I think there is an enormous amount of uncertainty within the science, but none of that should deter us from moving ahead aggressively with the solutions that we know make a difference.
That's great. I also feel that there's sort of the factor of human genius and human imagination that isn't calculated into these scientific equations. I've lived my life in the world of what's possible. And it isn't quantifiable on the front end, but wow, can you make things happen that are unforeseen and unimaginable? While that's not a scientific answer, it's one that I find myself, and as I teach young people, it's really the only answer I can give. That we need moral imagination. We need to lead with that. In my own personal compost journey, where I have seen soil reproduce itself to become micronutrient rich, where it was sand just last year. It's incredible what's possible when you employ all of what nature has to offer. So I think while it is daunting, the task at hand, the more we can inspire ourselves to take action and to improve our lives and the lives of the people we love and the organizations that we love, and include, this exciting time. I've dedicated my life to this because I think it's the most exciting thing we can be doing.
Wonderful.
And I would like to share something touching a little bit on what Cecilie has shared in terms of imagination. This is the latest Time magazine, and in it there is an article called Seeding a Revolution. And it's a fascinating article about a chef in the south of Spain who is using eelgrass as a way to take the seeds, which is kind of being cooked and used like rice. And so that's one of his areas that he's focusing on. But it's more than that. He's going to be using this as a way to sequester carbon. So that is something that was not even spoken about in Drawdown, and it's in time now, this week's time. So you never know what else could come up.
Yeah, some of these solutions sound sort of like a combination between engineering solutions and what do you call them, natural solutions. And I was wondering about the engineering part. So what, you know, some people kind of put that down as, oh, they're just trying to placate us into thinking climate change isn't that bad because don't worry, technology is the answer to everything. What would you say about that? Because there's a lot of solutions coming out, you know, like carbon capture and so forth that I'm always skeptical about. I don't know what to think about.
Yeah.
Well, I put a bit of a downer sometimes, and I say technology was also the problem to start. So we sometimes don't know where it's going to take us. Anyway, you go, Cecilie.
Well, Pachamama Alliance draws a wonderful balance in how we can approach this problem. The human social justice component and also our own personal relationship to nature, I think is critical for keeping us grounded, keeping us in right relation to our world. That is what got out of balance in the first place. Colonization, domination, extraction, these are the original sins of this problem. In order to shift and to make new choices, we have to ground ourselves in the idea that we are nature and we are not above nature. We are not dominating nature. We are not here to mastermind. And I think that's what Terry's pointing to, that in Kitty as well, that feeling that, oh, we can't mastermind our way out of it. We need solutions. We need innovation, but it must be balanced with our heart, our feet on the ground, and our hands in the soil. You can't even underestimate the power of soil. If you watch the Kiss the Ground movie, if you're engaged in some of these, I see a lot of composting questions, which I love, because it's the most grounding thing we can do is to take care of our own personal food waste and make it into a resource. It's almost like magic. It's like, we call it a superpower. When you can transform your food into a resource, and it's something we do every day, that's powerful.
The other idea I'll just add, if you're going to do something big, and reversing global warming is big, if you're going to do something big, you have to involve everybody. You can't leave communities out. We have to find a way to change our understanding of, as Cecilie's pointing out, that we are part of something very large. We are part of nature. And we need, at this point, to come to that realization and find a way to bring everybody along. And that is not something that the modern worldview is very good at. We like to separate and analyze and power things through. This is, I think, a new way of governing, a new way of understanding life that Cecilie really just alluded to.
Do we know what goals or limits the leaders are planning to pledge to at the Glasgow meeting in November? Will it be different from the Paris Accord in the outcome, in the decisions that people make, the agreements they make, the pledges?
I can't say specifically what the limits are that they're going to pledge, but I do know that science is tracking all this. You know, if you look online, I'm sure you're very informed citizenry on this call. And you can really get information that the scientists are now cooperating. The IPCC report that came out in 2015, really was the turning point. So there's a massive cooperation, and with big data, they're able to really crunch these numbers fast. And that's why Drawdown is an open source format. Expect revision regularly as we move forward. I was very attached to the rankings when I was teaching just a few years ago, where my students would say, well, what's the top thing to do? Well, refrigerant management, but most people say, well, what can I do about that? Right. And then plant-rich diet and reducing food waste, those combined, if you combine those were the top solutions. So it was kind of fun to weigh them out, and it was a point of engagement, really. So when they got rid of the ranking, as they have in 2020, I was a little disappointed. I thought, wow, that was kind of a point of excitement for my students. But the point is that it's a constantly shifting and evolving science. So I feel strongly that whatever is the most important accomplishments or goals in November may be a surprise. That's what Paul Hawkins said when he put the first book out. He said, we did the math, we ran the numbers, and we were surprised. So even predictions aren't always that effective. I think that we will continue to see the science evolve as long as we're running the math and following that. That's what's critical. And then I think innovation, and I also think that keeping the warming rate below. I know the first goal was 1%, and then it was 1.5%, and we see it climbing. So I'm very aware that it's a moving target. But honestly, I don't think there's any other way, but because it's nature, it's changing. We have to be respectful of that.
And I think what's exciting about this particular moment in history actually is that given what the Biden administration has embraced, their reverence, I want to say, because compared to the last administration, their reverence for science, and they've made it very clear with COVID, they've made it very clear with climate issues, that they're wanting to work with scientists. There aren't going to be the impediments and the dodging and diving that was taking place, in the past years. And I think I think this is a great moment for the climate scientists to be engaging policymakers.
Drawdown was a huge intervention in the structure of motivation for people around the world. A kind of a defeatist notion, we're going to mitigate, we're going to slow down the damage, to no, we're going to stop and reverse. And that is such a tonic for people to get into action and find where they can make a difference. Look among the 80 or 100 solutions, go online, find a community, pitch in, whether it's cook stoves or solar panels on homes or food waste or whatever it is. We each have a contribution to make, but it's the shift of attitude toward what is it that we're about. We now have a goal, reversing global warming, and we can get on with that. And perhaps that will have seeped into the consciousness of the meeting that's coming up, where people can raise their sights and take larger risks as we move ahead.
Great, thank you guys. So there's a number of questions here. We'll probably have time for one or two more. With many Republicans still back into arguing that there isn't really a climate problem, how do we get a vast number of the general population to realize that this is a critical existential problem which we have to work on immediately?
Want to go, Cecily?
There's a couple thoughts I have on that. I took a sustainability course at Santa Monica College 2 years ago, which I highly recommend, by the way. There are free sustainability classes at Santa Monica College, and they're all online right now. So that's a great resource if you care to learn and educate yourself more. These are solution-based classes. I'm kind of a big picture thinker, you can imagine by presenting this material. What I came away from that class was realizing that you have to start local. You have to engage your community in action where you live. And again, it kind of comes back to that idea of having a connection with the land on which you live. The gardeners, the master gardeners, these people understand that. It's really beholding to all of us as humans on this planet to regain our connection to our land. This is the beginning of how we can create that shift and convince people, not by talking to them, but by getting involved, by sharing experiences, by composting together, by creative, eventually when we can come back together, having meals together. People really are more open than we realize, but they need opportunities and they need support.
Yeah.
That's what we have found in, sorry, I keep bringing up composting, but it's not just about reducing the food waste and breaking it down and creating soil. It's about creating this connection between people and community that give people a reason to do it. When you have an elder talking to a teenager and they're talking about something that's meaningful to both, wow, that starts to shift a community. So I think the other thing we talk about in the Drawdown workshop is the climate deniers, we're probably never going to convince them. So really shifting our emphasis from trying to convince people to really working with those that are interested, and then those others may come along at some point, but it can't really be our focus. Tara, did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Cecilie. But if you can imagine a bell curve, there are those who are gung-ho, already in action. There are those at the other end who are never going to get into action. And we need to focus on that middle section, people who are maybe not aware, but some that are more aware and are just looking for direction and looking for ways to get engaged. So that's the primary focus that I think we need to have.
I'll just use the word leadership, and that with the change of administration and change of focus at the top, the people who are ready and equipped to run for political office can make a difference in the way they seek this local leverage, where local groups can reach out to one another rather than imagining a whole evangelical movement to the United States and the world. How can we find local leadership to begin to stitch that schism back together and then move ahead on this existential crisis? And I'll also say race. It's all interconnected.
Okay. Okay, I think we're probably out of time. So I want to just thank you for the wonderful answers, and all of you who put in the questions. Thank you so much too. I think I just want to say a couple of closing remarks. Two of the major reasons for the failure of citizens to take personal and political action on climate change is lack of awareness of its urgency and feelings of hopelessness. So while it's important to be aware of the horrific ways that climate change affects us all and understand that it is an emergency, an existential one, it's also important to see the positive solutions in order not to feel overwhelmed. And that's exactly what Project Drawdown can do. They can present and they do. They present solutions that are already practiced throughout the globe and from which all of us can receive encouragement and hope. And the League of Women Voters also encourages, what we do is we encourage policy changes to try to achieve some of these solutions. So I think we really work together well in our aspirations. We hope that you will sign up for the Drawdown workshop. It's going to be held every Monday in February and the second Monday in March at 7 p.m. And we hope you will attend the Natural Resource Committee of the League, of the Pasadena League, our next virtual event, which is Thursday, March 18th. And it's about Pasadena's climate action plan. So if you want to know more about what Pasadena is doing and what they could be doing, then you want to attend this event. So the registration links will be to all of these things will be on the League of Women Voters Pasadena area YouTube page. So can we put that in the chat, that link? Let's see, I have it here, but it's kind of long if you want to write it down. It's info at, I'm sorry, that's not the one. I don't have it. Okay, so we are going to get in touch with everybody who registered and give them the important links, including the Drawdown presentation link. Tuck, did you have something to say about that? Okay.
I'm affirming what you're saying.
So in relation to our wrap up, we wanted to ask everybody to get on the chat, and everybody who wants to, and just invite you to share any brief last minute reflections you have on Drawdown or even on this webinar itself. And while you're doing that, I just wanted again to thank our wonderful panelists, Cecilie, Terry, and Tuck. And in addition, warm thanks to the individuals who worked so hard on this webinar. Bob Pendleton, Ruth Judkins, Maureen Johnston, Kathy Kunis, Gail Oswald, and many others. And last but not least, thanks to all of you who joined us today. And we're also going to have a recording on this webinar, which is pretty much ready right at the end of this webinar. And again, I'll have to send you the link to it. We'll have to send you the link. And also, if you would like to join the NRC, you can let me know in the email that's also going to be sent to you with all these other links. And that's the NRC is the Natural Resources Committee, which I'm chairing. So we hope that you have all been inspired by this Drawdown webinar. Hopefully you can look at some of the remarks in the chat room. And I wish you all to be safe and have a wonderful weekend. And we'll see you. We'll wait a couple minutes so you have a chance to look at the chat, and then we will see you shortly again, I hope.
So, Kitty, I'd like to just end off by thanking you, members of the League, for the work you're doing. One of the assumptions that Drawdown made at the beginning was that policies would be in place to make these scientific solutions come into effect. So the work that you do with helping to shape policy at different levels of government, local, regional, national, is vitally important to this work that needs to be done. So thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you're doing.
Great. On behalf of the League, I want to say thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. We're all in it together.
Thank you, Kitty. We really appreciated being involved in your program.
Thanks, Kitty.
Okay, everybody. So why don't I give you, let me see, we've still got 53 people on as participants. So we'll just give you a couple more minutes. But anybody who has to leave, feel free to leave, and I won't close it quite yet. Okay. I'm just going to read some of these links.
Kitty, can I just do one more plug for the workshop?
Sure.
I just want to say that if you're engaged, if this has inspired you, which I see lots of positive inspiration and renewed commitment to action in the area of climate reversal, the workshop is really a get into action experience. So it won't just be about learning more. You will learn, but you'll be doing a lot of the research yourself. You'll be in supporting one another. So it's a really great way to anchor your action with support of others. So it helps us not feel alone, helps us feel in community and inspired to stay connected.
Great. Good. Well, here's an interesting one. The most interesting recognition that I had was that it is a huge shift for many people to honor and respect all life. This will change how I approach my work in climate change action. A lot of good comments here. It's important to have a message of hope, especially for young people who can feel so hopeless about these issues. It struck me that good solutions can be had by engaging families and communities. I thought my own actions wouldn't make much difference. That all depends on policy level. I thought that everything depends on policy level decision making. Great. I'm glad that Cecilie discussed level 1 solutions, which I believe are not emphasized enough. It seems to me most people are focused on government, corporate, or technological solutions. I feel that instead of trying to change others' behavior, one should first change one's own behavior. Living more sustainably has never been easier. For example, biking, electric cars, solar power, plant-based diet, gardening, composting, rainwater harvesting, etc. And not only stresses the environment less, but is also financially smart, healthier lifestyle, and makes one more resilient. So kind of summing up a lot of what you said, Cecilie. Great comments here.
Let me just add how wonderful it's turning out to get together on Zoom. And it's very efficient. And when you said 50, 55 people, 51 people are still engaged, it was a real lift to know that we're getting the word out. So this is another one of those unexpected things that can really be a game changer in terms of climate and social justice.
I think we had 86 people at throughout most of it. So people are leaving now. So I think I'm going to close it. Thank you again, everybody, for everything you did.
Everybody.
Thank you, Kitty.
Bye.
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Cecilie.